Today's video is brought to you by Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury attorney law firm, ready to fight for you. When dealing with the consequence of injury, sometimes it can feel like you have no options and that receiving proper compensation just isn't plausible. But Morgan & Morgan is here to fight for you. Did you know that proper representation from a lawyer is said to gain on average 3 times more compensation than fighting a case on your own? With 800 attorneys in 49 different states, covering a major range of specialties and expertise, Morgan & Morgan will fight to get you the compensation you deserve. And the best part, Morgan & Morgan operates using a no-win, no-fee basis to put your mind at ease while you focus on getting justice. If you're interested in what you hear, check out Morgan & Morgan for yourself by clicking the link in the description of this video, or using your phone, you can dial #LAW. That's pound 529, or visit www.forthepeople.com to get started on receiving the compensation you deserve.
Anything or frighten you, they claim I frighten everybody. Why? I'm now 63 years old. I could whip a 10-year-old boy. But have any of you at any time been frightened? I don't like it when you touch my brother. Don't look cross-eyed at my brother. Then I became what they call a raving maniac. Do I make myself clear? Abuse me, do what you want, slap me in the face, and I won't say nothing. But don't you pick on my family.
Number 1 in part 3 of the most violent and ruthless killers in the Mafia, Samuel Mad Sam DeStefano. A man considered by some to be the worst torture murderer in the history of the United States, and was known for having a soundproof basement decorated with torture tools where he would torture and kill his victims underneath his home in the west side suburb of Chicago, a home which he shared with his wife and 3 kids. Mad Sam DeStefano, who would come to be an enforcer for the Chicago outfit, wasn't a typical gangster. At 18 years old, DeStefano would be found guilty of violating a 17-year-old girl, and on August 19, 1927, the girl was forced into a car and driven to a garage where 7 men, which included Mad Sam, all violated her. DeStefano would be found guilty of the assault charges and sentenced to 3 years. One of the earliest arrests that could be found on him was from just 1 year prior in 1926, when on September 12th, Mad Sam was arrested in Chicago and released to the Niles Police Department after being picked up as a fugitive for breaking out of jail. It's been reported that members of the West Side Gang, which Sam was a member of, showed up to his court date in droves on July 1st, 1927, threatening violence against a police sergeant for shooting an associate of Mad Sam's and for Mad Sam's arrest. By 1930, Mad Sam would join the infamous Chicago street gang, the 42 Gang, which would come to be led by future outfit boss Sam Giancana, and Mad Sam would get into the bootlegging and gambling businesses. In 1932, Mad Sam would be shot by a police officer during the robbery of a grocery store, and in August of that same year, it would be reported that DeStefano checked himself into a hospital with multiple bullet wounds but refused to give any information. Mad Sam would be convicted of a bank robbery in 1933 and sentenced to 40 years in prison, but his sentence would end up being commuted by Governor Julius Hale in December of 1944. By June 1947, he would be locked up again for possession of counterfeit food stamps. After DeStefano joined Giancana's 42 Gang in the 1960s, he would slowly move his way up in the family from a petty street criminal to a strong force in Chicago's criminal underworld, becoming a major loan shark as well as a major drug trafficker. But despite DeStefano's ability to turn a profit and put in work with the best of them, his rise to the top of the Chicago outfit would be stifled due to the fact the other leaders of the family considered him to be too unstable for any high-ranking positions, despite the fact most of the men Mad Sam came up with in the 42 Gang all went on to become prominent, high-ranking members of the outfit, including Sam's own brother, Mario Anthony DeStefano, who was credited with bringing the juice loan to Chicago at the time. Despite the fact that his bosses wouldn't allow Mad Sam to be made, bosses like Sam Momo Giancana and Paul the Waiter Rica would still use Mad Sam as a go-to to help handle their dirty work. DeStefano would come to be known as a, quote, stone-cold executioner and feared loan collector throughout the area, using his soundproof torture chamber of horrors to convince loan takers to pay their debts. It's said Mad Sam had many different tools in his torture room that he would use to inflict pain. His favorite being an ice pick, which he's said to have used to stab his victims in the torso, the testicles, and the throat to receive payment, or just for recreation before finishing the job and viciously murdering them. Now that I covered the basics of where Mad Sam stood with the outfit, I can cover how Sam earned his nickname Mad Sam and some of the stories of his victims who had visited his torture chamber. One of those victims was a local restaurant owner named Artie Adler, who failed to make payment on a loan. Adler was taken to Mad Sam's basement, where he would be tortured with an ice pick, but during his torture session, Adler would suffer a heart attack and die. Adler's body would be dumped in a sewer, where it would stay frozen all winter and would finally be found in spring of that year perfectly preserved. Another man named Peter Cappelletti would also find his way into Sam's basement after running off with $25K he owed the sadistic killer. But instead of being murdered, Cappelletti would just be tortured and humiliated. Cappelletti would be taken to Sam's brother Mario's restaurant, Cicero, where he would be stripped naked and then handcuffed and tied to a boiling radiator, where Mad Sam would beat, torture, and burn the man for 3 days. On the third day, Mad Sam would invite Cappelletti's whole family to the restaurant under the pretext they were there to honor Cappelletti. The family would be served a full-course Italian dinner while awaiting the arrival of Cappelletti, who Mad Sam assured them was coming. Once the meal was finished, the naked and severely burned Cappelletti was brought into the dining hall and dropped at his mother's feet, where it said either Mad Sam himself or Cappelletti's family was forced to urinate on him. Cappelletti would then be let go with the promise of payment, making an example out of him, ensuring other loan takers wouldn't make the same mistake. Mad Sam was so cutthroat that when outfit boss Sam Giancana ordered the hit of Mad Sam's little brother Michael in 1955, Mad Sam took the contract and whacked his own blood with no hesitation, and years later, when DeStefano was questioned about it, he refused to answer any questions, but instead is said to have started eerily laughing uncontrollably, and when questioned further, he would just laugh harder. Sam was also accompanied by his other brother Mario when he carried out the hit on his brother Michael, and apparently Michael was a drug addict, which DeStefano looked down on, so after killing him, it said Mad Sam went above and beyond to try to remove any traces of drugs in his system before abandoning the body in the trunk of his car. Another gruesome act carried out by Mad Sam involved his protege Tony Spilatro and another associate Chucky Grimaldi, who would help DeStefano lure legit real estate agent and loan collector for Mad Sam, Leo Foreman, to Sam's brother's home under the pretext of squashing a beef over an argument the two had where Sam was thrown out of Foreman's business. Once inside, Spilatro, Grimaldi, and Mario snatched him and tied him up. While awaiting Mad Sam's arrival, the three men would, quote, soften Foreman up by beating his kneecaps with a hammer, as well as being beat in the head, crotch, and ribs. Mad Sam would then come in strategically poking and stabbing Foreman with an ice pick in order to inflict maximum pain without killing him. According to Grimaldi, who later turned government witness, Mad Sam came sliding in his pajamas from a bedroom, laughing at Foreman, telling him, "I told you I'd get you. Greed got you killed." Then as Foreman begged for his life, DeStefano would shoot him in the butt repeatedly. The crew would then watch Foreman bleed out in pain before finishing the job by torturing him with a butcher knife, where the three men took turns chopping chunks of flesh from his forearms, eventually torturing the man to death. At some point, Mad Sam's psychotic behavior became more than the leaders of the outfit asked for, and it really became a problem when DeStefano was called to testify before a grand jury and began publicly making a circus out of the court proceedings, acting as his own attorney, going to court in pajamas, pulling up to court on a stretcher, and going on long rants where he would attempt to discredit the investigators, making bizarre claims they were colluding against him with Joseph Stalin. Then in 1972, Chicago outfit enforcer Chucky Grimaldi would flip and become a government witness, giving up his former outfit members Mad Sam, his brother Mario, and Tony Spilatro for the torture and murder of Leo Foreman. While the three of them were locked up awaiting trial, Mad Sam would again act as his own attorney at court and once again make a circus of the trial, making a spectacle and causing lots of media attention, which rubbed his co-defendants Spilatro and his brother Mario the wrong way. With all the media attention Sam was bringing to their case, it made it impossible to try and bribe the judge or jury or pull off any other type of corruption, so the two devised a plan to shut Mad Sam up for good. They would tell Mad Sam that they got the location where Chucky Grimaldi was being held by law enforcement. So the following Saturday, on April 14th, 1973, Mad Sam was outside in his garage waiting to be picked up by the two men. When they pulled up in the driveway and Sam's brother began walking up to Sam, followed by Tony Spilatro, and the three men got within a few feet of each other, Mario would step aside for Spilatro, who would pull out a double-barrel shotgun he was concealing and fire off both barrels rapidly, hitting DeStefano in the arm and ripping his arm off, and a second shot blowing a hole in his chest, killing him instantly. It's said Mad Sam was truly a crazy sadist, and on top of all of his torturing, Mad Sam would brag about feeding his victims to the pigs, and was said to drive to pig farms and just watch them for hours. Grimaldi would tell FBI agents that on one occasion, Sam forced his wife to put a gun in her mouth and pulled the trigger, telling her only afterwards that he took the bullets out, just to scare her for fun. On another occasion, it said after an argument with his wife, Sam kidnapped a man at gunpoint and took him to his house and forced his wife to perform oral on the man. According to one FBI agent who was sent to visit Mad Sam at his house, Sam would come down the stairs in his pajamas, exposing himself, and would offer the agents coffee made from special Italian beans. After drinking the coffee, the agents would later find out that Sam was urinating in it.
Authorities say there is one man they couldn't stop, a man considered the most feared of Carmine Persico's allies, a man who police say is probably responsible for escalating the Colombo War.
Gregory Scarpa.
Gregory Scarpa. His name is Gregory Scarpa.
One of the most notorious wise guys was Greg Scarpa, who had a reputation for brutality.
The violent killer, Gregory Scarpa Sr., a.k.a. the Grim Reaper. Scarpa was the chief enforcer and most feared executioner for the Colombo crime family.
He was a made guy, a button in the Colombo family.
A tough guy, too.
Very tough. Was absolutely fearless, one of the toughest guys I've ever seen.
His toughness may have been legendary, but what no one in the Colombo family knew was that the Grim Reaper was also a rat.
Number 2. Gregory Scarpa Sr., a.k.a. the Grim Reaper. A fearless and cold-blooded killer for the Colombo crime family operating from the 1950s until the early 1990s. Greg Scarpa Sr. would earn his nickname the Grim Reaper because of his power, his ability to be slick, and his brutality. Scarpa is another one on the list suspected of being involved in as many as 100 murders or more, once telling Colombo soldier Larry Mazza that he stopped counting his kills at 50 bodies. Scarpa is unique because not only was he a brutal and violent killer for 42 plus years, but he spent more than half of that time working as a confidential informant for the FBI, using his position as an informant to manipulate the streets, and true to his criminal ways, he would use his position as a gangster to manipulate the FBI, staying loyal only to himself the entire time. In Peter Lance's book, Deal with the Devil, he gives a detailed, in-depth account of the relationship between the Grim Reaper and the FBI over the years. More specifically, Scarpa and his FBI handlers, Louis Villano and Lindley DeVecchio. Although I'm sure Scarpa wasn't exactly transparent with the FBI, he still couldn't have done as much damage as he did without a handler like DeVecchio enabling him. The FBI, with the knowledge of FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, was giving Scarpa almost free reign on the street, all in the hopes Scarpa would be able to become boss of the Colombo family, so they could finally have an informant inside the commission of the 5 families. And in some cases, it even appears DeVecchio was encouraging Scarpa to go to war. On top of it, Scarpa was being paid cash on demand, as well as collecting insurance money for locating stolen merchandise with the help of the FBI, while behind their backs, he was the one committing the thefts. Gregory Scarpa Sr. was quite possibly the most vicious killer in the history of Luccesse Nostra. According to Deal with the Devil, Scarpa Sr. was controlling a $70,000 a week drug operation. He had an international auto theft ring. He was said to be the largest stolen credit card trafficker in the New York State area. He was a loan shark and had $2.5 million on the streets from loans. He ran a bank robbery crew and was said to be a top-notch hijacker, netting around $13 million on one given weekend. Scarpa was so connected, it seemed on top of all these things listed, he had his hands in everything. The author of the book, Deal with the Devil, Peter Lance, would describe Scarpa as a Medellin cartel-level earner. Not only was Scarpa a smart businessman, but he was also a stone-cold, brutal killer, killing anyone who might have been a threat to his operations, including his own brother, as well as a woman named Mary Berry, who, according to mob informant Carmine Sessa, knew the whereabouts of Colombo underboss Alley Boy Persico, a fellow ally of Scarpa's who jumped $250,000 bail and went on the run instead of facing 20 years for extortion back in the 1980s. It's alleged that Alley Boy told Scarpa to kill the 31-year-old Mary Berry because he feared she might cave if she was pressured by the feds. Also, according to Colombo family consigliere Carmine Sessa, he would testify Scarpa asked him to use his Obsession social club to kill Barry, and he was present when the young woman showed up to the club, believing she was there for a job interview as a waitress. A ruse Scarpa used to lure her to the club. It's then said after entering the club, Greg's son, Gregory Scarpa Jr., would put his arm around Barry as if he was greeting her, and then push her to the ground, where it's then said the Grim Reaper would shoot Mary Barry 3 times in the head. Her body would then be rolled up into a blanket or rug and tossed on McDonald Avenue under the elevated train just blocks from Scarpa's house. She was put into the trunk of Greg's car while Sessa would follow in his car. The Grim Reaper, weighing in at 5'10", 220 pounds, was once described by one agent as an ox of a man, which made him a great head cracker and debt collector for the Profaci family, back when he first got his start in the 1950s through his brother Sal. After a few years of putting in work for the bosses, in 1953, Scarpa would be put to the ultimate test when he was ordered to kill a man, which Scarpa was said to have done without hesitation. That would officially earn him a slot as a made man. Scarpa would become such an effective killer, he would earn the nicknames not only the Grim Reaper, but also names like the Mad Hatter, the Killing Machine, and Hannibal Lecter. It was even said to have signed his personal letters with the initials KM for Killing Machine. Scarpa, who controlled 13th Avenue in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn with an iron fist, is responsible for at least 25 homicides from 1980 to 1992 alone, and all while under the supervision of DeVecchio. According to Scarpa's protege turned informant Larry Mazza, Scarpa once killed 3 men in one 4-week period with Mazza present. One of those men was Vincent Fisaro, who Scarpa shot in the head with a rifle from his car while the man was on a ladder hanging Christmas decorations on the door of his home on Bay 11th in Brooklyn. The second man killed was a 78-year-old Genovese member, who Scarpa would later state was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. The third man killed was Nicholas Grancio, aka Nicky Black, who sided with the Arena faction when the internal Colombo War started in the 1990s. Grancio had pulled up to a red light in his Toyota when he was spotted by Scarpa. Scarpa would pull up alongside Grancio to take his shot, but his gun would jam, so he would then order Mazza to execute the hit. Mazza would stick his shotgun out the window and blow Nicky Black's face all over the windshield, ripping off his nose in the process. One man named Cosmo Catanzaro would barely escape the Grim Reaper, who had heard Catanzaro was talking to the feds. Scarpa went as far as to have a hole dug for Catanzaro's body, but before Scarpa had a chance to complete the job, Catanzaro would be arrested by the DEA, saving him from Scarpa's wrath. During his 42-plus years as a Colombo capo, Scarpa would be arrested and indicted 20 times, but with the help of his FBI buddies, he wouldn't serve any prison time until the very end of his run. Now, normally a capo who had his own crew and social club, like Scarpa had the Wimpy Boys Club and crew, you would insulate yourself and let your crew do the work. But not Scarpa. He was on the front lines doing hijackings, robberies, dealing drugs, and shooting people. The Grim Reaper is credited with provoking all of the internal Colombo wars in one way or another. It's said he helped move along the assassination attempt on Joe Colombo at the Italian-American Civil Rights League rally in 1971, where Joe Colombo was shot down in front of a crowd of over 50,000 people. According to Deal with the Devil, Scarpa is responsible for igniting the Second Colombo Civil War between Carmine Persico and the Gallo brothers in the early 1970s, and helped encourage the hit on Crazy Joe Gallo in 1972. It said Scarpa also provided the FBI with the probable cause they needed to get the wiretaps installed that would seal the fate of 3 Mafia bosses in the famous commissions case in the 1980s, landing them all life sentences, including Carmine Persico. Scarpa's dark side would shine again when Scarpa's nephew, Gus Faraci, gunned down a DEA agent, Edward Hatchett, he suspected of being a rat. It said Scarpa was the man who set his nephew up to be shot and killed after 9 months on the run in order to take the heat off of the other New York families, being that the murder of Hatchett sparked a 500-man DEA FBI task force that wasn't going to let up on the 5 families until Faraci was caught. In Deal with the Devil, Peter Lance shows evidence that Scarpa was a longtime friend of our next brutal and violent killer, Anthony Gaspipe Casso, and the two were said to run different crews who were part of the same bypass gang, and would also split scores. Scarpa would provide Casso with inside information from the FBI, while Casso would give Scarpa information he got from his mob cops connection. Casso was also a good friend of Scarpa's good friend Joe Brewster, who was part of Casso's robbery crew. The book states the two would work together on many robberies and hijackings. When the books reopened, Scarpa even offered to sponsor Casso to be made with the Colombos, which he declined, eventually becoming acting boss of the Luccesse family. According to Casso, Joe Brewster Di Domenico was the main connection between the two ruthless killers, Greg Scarpa and Anthony Casso. Scarpa gave Casso tips on big heists, including diamonds and jewelry. Casso would take Brewster with him on the heists. I'll get more into some of Casso's connections to Scarpa, but first let's finish wrapping up the story of the Grim Reaper. Suspected of his part in over 100 murders over his 42-year reign by either pulling the trigger himself or ordering the hit, as far as brutal and violent mafia killers go, Scarpa has to be somewhere at the top of the list. He played the life like a game of chess, planning his moves 5 steps ahead of his enemies. With Scarpa's FBI connections, he was able to operate freely on the street, basically without having the fear of being arrested, which made Scarpa one of the most powerful mobsters ever. Eventually, Scarpa would develop a stomach ulcer from taking too much aspirin on a daily basis, and while hospitalized, he would end up needing a blood transfusion. And instead of using blood from the hospital blood bank on the doctor's advice, Scarpa would use blood from one of his crew members who was unknowingly using steroids and unaware that he had contracted the HIV virus from sharing a needle with someone. In turn, Scarpa would contract AIDS, which at the time was a death sentence.
I will show them the courage that I've displayed all this time, the bravado. I will show them that, hey, this is still me. There isn't anything on earth that I will hide from or back up from. And I certainly won't do it with this either.
Instead of AIDS slowing Scarpa down, according to feds, he would use his diagnosis as a license to kill. Despite his deteriorating health and being confined to house arrest, when Scarpa's son told him that 2 drug dealers disrespected him, Scarpa grabbed his gun, took his son and Joseph Randazzo to go in search of the men. Upon making contact with them, a shootout would begin. Scarpa would land the first shot on one of the men, but the man's friend immediately fired back, hitting Scarpa in the eye, leaving him blind. Randazzo would be seriously wounded while Scarpa Jr. fled. Scarpa would drive himself home and drink a glass of scotch before summoning Larry Mazza to take him to the hospital. After surviving 42 years as a Colombo gangster, in 1993, Scarpa would finally be forced to plead guilty to 3 murders and conspiracy to murder several other men. In December of 1993, he would be sentenced to 10 years, but on June 4th, 1994, Scarpa would meet the real Grim Reaper and pass away in prison.